If Tiger King was your video comfort watch at the height of COVID, you'll want to hear this update about the show's villains from the PETA attorney who's fighting to shut down their industry. Next on the PETA Podcast. Welcome to the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo, your host for this inside look at PETA, the largest animal rights organization in the world. On today's episode, Tim Stark, Jeff Lowe, Joe Exotic, and of course, Carole Baskin. So much has happened since you watched Tiger King at the beginning of the pandemic, and while producers may be planning a sequel to Tiger King, it's looking more likely that the main story is how PETA has helped shut down the big cat petting zoo industry. Brittany Peet is PETA Foundation Deputy General Counsel for Captive Animal Law Enforcement, aka CALE. She's elated now that former Joe Exotic business associate Tim Stark was ordered to pay court costs to PETA amounting to $733,997.70. PETA may not see a penny, but winning the judgment gives PETA huge leverage that could keep the Tiger King villains from ever starting a roadside zoo again. Here's Pete with updates on Tim Stark, Jeff Lowe, Joe Exotic, and Carole Baskin, and even some updates on the animals who were taken from the villains on the PETA Podcast.
The past few years have been truly monumental when it comes to the ultimate demise of the big cat cub petting industry. And that's really where we are right now. We were looking the other day at a list that we compiled a while back of all of the big cat cub petting exhibitors. And it used to be a very long list, and there are only a couple left. So we really are seeing the demise of that industry. And it really is thanks to this tremendous work that has been done by PETA's Captive Animal Law Enforcement Division and the litigation division working together.
And it really is also the attention of Joe Exotic and the TV show didn't hurt either, right?
That's absolutely right. Tiger King has been an incredible blessing for our work to end the cub petting industry. It allowed us over the past year to get international press every time we heard from members of the public about animal welfare issues at these facilities, or the USDA issued a new inspection report documenting animal welfare issues. It shined an international huge light on these facilities, and it ultimately forced even the United States government to act. We saw what we never thought we would see over the past year when the U.S. Department of Justice actually filed its own lawsuit against Jeff and Lauren Lowe, Joe Exotic's former business partners, under both the Endangered Species Act and the Animal Welfare Act, mimicking PETA's own arguments in our wildlife in need case, that premature maternal separation of endangered big cat cubs violates the Endangered Species Act, and that big cat cub petting itself violates the Endangered Species Act. These are all things that would have, if you would have told me 5 years ago that this would have happened, I wouldn't have believed you.
Well, I did talk to you about this maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and you weren't nearly as optimistic as you are now.
No, I mean, I remember talking to Ingrid just last year before Tiger King came out about where we were with the big cat cub petting industry. And I said, we'll have it annihilated within 10 years. Well, fast forward a few months and we're almost there. We've almost done it.
And Ingrid Newkirk, again, is the president and founder of PETA. So look, I wanted to begin with the overall, global picture. Oh my God, the big cat petting industry is almost dead. I mean, you mentioned the list. It's it's smaller than ever. But before we get to the other aspect, you can honestly say, if it weren't for Tiger King and the exposure of Tiger King, we wouldn't be at this juncture right now.
I don't know if I would go that far, because we were already making huge progress by that point with our successful lawsuits against the Dade City's Wild Things and Wildlife in Need roadside zoos, in which we established the first ever legal precedents that premature maternal separation and big cat cub petting for endangered big cats violates the ESA. So, we'd made huge strides at that point. We were already deterring exhibitors from doing this because they didn't want to be next on PETA's hit list. And we were also drying up the supply of big cat cubs because we were going after breeders. But Tiger King definitely moved us in the right direction, and I think is getting us there to our goal faster.
Okay, great. So we got the big news out. PETA's had this impact, but the thing that's really critical is that there were a couple of legal rulings that were in PETA's favor that really has pretty much tightened the screws on everyone who is left in this the Tiger King cast of characters. So we had Tim Stark and we had Jeff Lowe. Tim Stark, who is Tim Stark again?
So Tim Stark was the owner and operator of Wildlife in Need, which was a roadside zoo in Indiana that offered cub petting with tigers, lions, and tiger-lion hybrid cubs. He declawed a lot of the cubs, which was also part of our lawsuit. But he is really was one of the worst of the worst. He talked gleefully about beating a leopard to death with a baseball bat. This is a sadistic, violent, cruel person. And PETA filed an ESA, Endangered Species Act lawsuit against him and his facility. It was our second ESA suit challenging the cub petting industry. And our first lawsuit, which was against Dade City's Wild Things in Florida, focused only on tiger cubs. But in our suit against Tim Stark, we wanted to move the ball forward. And so in that suit, we alleged that premature maternal separation and cub petting violates the ESA, not just as to tigers, but also as to lions, and critically to tiger-lion hybrids, because these exhibitors were all saying, well, we're just going to breed Ligors and Tigons, lion-tiger hybrids now, because they're not covered under the Endangered Species Act. Well, they were wrong. And our lawsuit against Wildlife in Need proved that. And now we've got the precedent on the books to show it.
Well, there really are Ligons and Tions.
Yeah, Ligors and Tigons and Ligors are all real, and they've all been part of this big cat cub petting industry, and they're bred to try to attract more members of the public with the novelty of these hybrids. Unfortunately for the cats, they suffer, they're inbred. They suffer lifelong physical and psychological abnormalities. Their life expectancy is much shorter than that of the non-hybrid cats. And that's something, the breeding of these hybrid cats is something that we're going to work to challenge in our next ESA lawsuit against Jeff Lowe to, again, move the ball forward. That's what we want to do with each one of these suits, is to make the Endangered Species Act stronger and stronger with each successive case.
So Tim Stark, you got the ruling against him, and he was a villain in Tiger King. So people would know him from Tiger King.
That's right. So Tim Stark did a lot of business with Joe Exotic, purchasing and trading big cat cubs with him. But he's most well known from Tiger King as Jeff Lowe's former business partner. Tim Stark and Jeff Lowe were working to start their own roadside zoo together in Oklahoma. But they fell out before that ever got off the ground.
And that was going to be a competitor to Joe Exotic, right?
he was in jail at the time, but it was, they envisioned it as sort of a super roadside zoo. They really thought that it was going to make them both rich by combining forces.
So this current suit updates things by saying Tim Stark can't do what he's doing anymore. Does it end his activities?
Well, PETA rescued 22 lions, tigers, and lion-tiger hybrids from wildlife in need in September of 2020. And when we left the facility that day, every single cage was empty of animals at wildlife in need. Because after PETA filed its ESA suit against the big cats, the Indiana Attorney General's office then filed a lawsuit against Tim Stark for misuse of nonprofit funds. And so, as part of PETA's lawsuit, Tim Stark was permanently enjoined from ever again owning endangered big cats. So he can never, ever again own a tiger, a lion, a leopard, a jaguar, or a lion-tiger hybrid.
Right. So no hybrids, and he can't run an operation. He's forbidden.
So after the Indiana Attorney General's office won its lawsuit, as part of that suit, he is no longer allowed to own any mammals or any animals that are native to Indiana. And so basically and because of a third lawsuit in which the U.S. Department of Agriculture revoked his license to exhibit animals, he can not only never again operate a roadside zoo or otherwise profit from animals, he can never again own animals.
This isn't just limited to Indiana. It's anywhere in the country.
PETA's ruling where he's prohibited from owning endangered big cats would apply throughout the country because that's a federal ruling. And the revocation of his USDA exhibitor's license would also be nationwide because that was a federal ruling. But the prohibition on all animals, that was an Indiana state court ruling. So, if he went to another state and tried to own some exotic animals, there's an open question relating to whether the state of Indiana would choose to enforce that. But we're in really great shape, and one of the worst animal abusers in the United States is done.
And then on top of it all, there was a ruling that the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Indiana ordered Tim Stark to pay PETA its court costs. That's kind of like a cherry on top, huh?
Yeah, and that's right. And, and so people understand, these court costs aren't just a few $100s. We're talking about more than $700,000 in attorney's fees and costs from PETA's lawsuit. So that gives PETA an incredible amount of leverage should Tim Stark ever choose to violate these court orders, or otherwise, if he's ever able to wiggle out of the Indiana ruling, we're going to be able to go after him and have a tremendous amount of leverage.
I mean, because the reality is that the court orders these costs. He can plead bankruptcy he doesn't, it's a long shot that PETA recovers any of this money, but it does prevent him from going forward to doing anything else without PETA bringing up the court cost issue. So this becomes, it adds to his cost of doing business. I just want to mention that you are with your companion animal, and if people hear any noises, it's because your companion animal needs just a little hug there or something.
That's right. Yes, his name is Leonard, and he just needed a little pet. So you may hear him, but
yeah. What kind of a dog, right?
Yeah, Leonard is he's a German Shepherd and Golden Retriever mix. He's a 3-legged dog. He was rescued by PETA after he was hit by a car, and his previous guardian, despite the fact that he had a badly broken leg, he didn't receive any veterinary treatment for over a week. until they called PETA, and PETA rushed right out and got him the help that he needed. And I was able to foster and then adopt him.
See, he was probably just getting sentimental for his lost leg there for a second. Just needed some comfort there.
Yeah.
All right. Well, all right. So this is Tim Stark. He's done, but now his partner was Jeff Lowe. And now what's the news that Jeff Lowe has made recently that is very positive in terms of PETA's efforts to shut down the industry?
Right. So there's been a lot of news about Jeff Lowe lately. Again, thanks in large part to PETA's arguments in the Wildlife in Need Tim Stark case. The DOJ filed suit against Jeff Lowe. And a big part of their case was that premature maternal separation and cub petting violates the ESA. And one of the things that we see with all of these lawsuits is that these defendants, these exhibitors, they don't think that they don't like the law, and they don't think that it should apply to them. And, these people are narcissists across the board. And so they defy court orders. They often refuse to participate in the litigation process. And that's really what's happened in this Jeff Lowe case. The Department of Justice at this point has been able to confiscate every ESA protected big cat on the Lowe's property in Oklahoma. Nearly 80 cats have been confiscated and transferred to reputable sanctuaries, which is a huge victory. And PETA played a large part in that, not only because the Department of Justice used our arguments and the precedent that we set in the Tim Stark case, but also because in their most recent and largest confiscation of big cats from Jeff Lowe's facility, they relied on information and testimony that PETA elicited in depositions and a site inspection of Jeff Lowe and his property that we conducted earlier this year.
So pretty much, what is the future for Jeff Lowe? Does he look like he has a chance to get back into business, or are there enough obstacles to keep him out?
Jeff Lowe's story is sounding a lot like Tim Stark's at this point. His USDA exhibitor's license has also been revoked by the USDA. The USDA also took steps to ensure that his wife, Lauren, couldn't simply obtain an exhibitor's license and open up a zoo and circumvent Lowe's revocation in that way. The DOJ has been aggressive and wonderful in prosecuting their civil lawsuit against the Lowes. And I think that we'll see a final ruling in that case relatively soon that will prevent the Lowes from ever again owning any threatened or endangered animal. And I expect that we'll also see the remaining animals on their property confiscated. PETA has filed a motion to join that suit. We have our own Endangered Species Act lawsuit teed up against the Lowes, as well as a public nuisance suit against the Lowes on behalf of the rest of the animals on the property. So we're ready to go in and start working that case as soon as the judge allows us to join. In the meantime, the Department of Justice is doing a great job, and the case may be resolved before the judge even gets to our motion, which is great. So basically, Jeff Lowe is on the ropes and he's almost down.
So Tim Stark is out of business, essentially. Jeff Lowe is almost down. These were two major players in Tiger King. Let's talk about the other major players from Tiger King. What is the latest on Joe Exotic? Is he still in prison? Does he look like I guess he didn't get a pardon from anyone?
Yeah, that's right. Joe is still in prison. He was aggressively seeking a pardon from Donald Trump when he was in office. That didn't come through. Joe has been seeking a pardon now from President Biden, which is highly unlikely to happen. And he's also been working on trying to get a new trial. We don't know what the basis is for that. It's likely that he's simply grasping at straws, and we don't expect to see Joe Exotic walking out of prison anytime soon.
How about, is he in touch with any of his former cohorts like Lowe or Stark, or his paramours, or his other partners? I mean, is someone minding his old zoo animals, or were they all taken away?
Well, so Joe's roadside zoo was the GW Exotic Animal Park in Wynnewood, Oklahoma. And before Joe was arrested, PETA rescued 39 big cats, 3 bears, 2 baboons, and 2 chimpanzees from the facility. And then after Joe fled the zoo and was arrested, Jeff Lowe was Joe's former business partner. And so he took over that facility when Joe went to prison. But Jeff then lost that zoo land in a lawsuit that was brought by Big Cat Rescue, owned by another Tiger King personality, Carol Baskin, the wonderful and effective big cat activist. And so then Jeff Lowe moved his facility and the remaining animals to Thackerville, Oklahoma, where he was working to open Tiger King Park. But then the DOJ filed suit, and everything else is history. Big Cat Rescue was able to rescue several big cats and a bear when they were taking over the property as well. So there have been many dozens of animals rescued from Joe Exotic and Jeff Lowe at this point.
And right now, their disposition is they're doing well.
Yes, we've as far as we know, the cats who were confiscated by the Department of Justice are doing well. We know that all of the animals PETA rescued from Joe Exotic are doing well. The 22 big cats that we rescued from Tim Stark were transferred to the Turpentine Creek Wildlife Refuge in Arkansas and the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Colorado. And they're all thriving at that facility. And as part of that lawsuit against Tim Stark, we were also able to rescue 3 juvenile lions from Jeff Lowe that Tim Stark had illegally transferred to him during the case. Those lions were in terrible shape when we rescued them in September. They were skin and bones. One of the cats, Nala, was so lame that she could only take a couple steps and she just fell over. And it turned out they took her to Colorado. The sanctuary took her to Colorado State University. The veterinarians there determined that it was just that she had severe nutritional deficiencies. They weren't even providing that basic level of care of providing her with an appropriate diet. And it caused a disease called metabolic bone disease that basically caused several fractures in this extremely young lion. But thankfully, we were able to get her out in time, and she's thriving now. But even if it was just a few days longer, she may not have survived.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why these roadside zoos are just they're just dangerous for the animals. They're dangerous for people. They should be banned, and you're getting close to that. Do we need an outright ban, or do these laws essentially make the functioning of a roadside zoo just moot?
Well, we're working on trying to make it as difficult as possible, or too difficult to operate a roadside zoo. But a ban, a sweeping ban, would be welcome, and it's needed. And at least for big cats, where we have an option there. It's called the Big Cat Public Safety Act, and everyone should call their federal senators and representatives and ensure that they're supporting the Big Cat Public Safety Act. What that would do is it would prohibit the private ownership of all big cats, and it would outright ban big cat cub petting. So we could eliminate this horrifically cruel industry with the stroke of a pen. And so it's extremely important that this legislation is passed. It passed in the House last year, but it wasn't brought up for a vote in the Senate by Mitch McConnell. So now that the Democrats are in control of the Senate, this bill has a great chance of passing both houses, and we do expect that President Biden would sign it into law. So we've got to get this done now. So it's really urgent that everyone calls and ensures that their federal representatives are supporting this legislation.
That would be a great victory, one that would be very gratifying, I'm sure, for someone like yourself who's fought so hard. Before I get to you, tell me more about what that other character in Tiger King, Carol Baskin, because she was one who some people thought, well, is she really the heroine? Is she a villain? And they played around with that. What is her status right now? She seems to be on the up and up. She's helped save a lot of animals. Where is she now?
Yeah, Carol is one of the most effective and prolific big cat activists in the world. She's had such a tremendous impact on big cats, both through her advocacy as well as at her accredited sanctuary, Big Cat Rescue, which provides excellent lifetime care to wild, exotic, and big cats. It's located in Florida. Right now, Carol is lobbying hard for the Big Cat Public Safety Act. It's one of her pet projects. She and her husband Howard have been pushing this legislation forward for the past several years, and they're making great progress. We're almost there.
How about, is there a chance that maybe there could be a sequel to the Tiger King shows? I mean, I know at one point there was talk about that. Is there a plan for that? The end of Tiger King or something?
I think it's pretty likely that we're going to be seeing a second season of Tiger King by the end of 2021. I think that we're going to see a lot of these stories updated because so much has happened since the first season came out, and everyone wants to know what has happened with all of these villains. And thankfully, almost every single one of them now is either in prison, out of business, or facing criminal charges. And it's a wonderful thing. And we're so happy to have gotten this far.
Is there one particular animal that, I mean, you've covered this case and you've been out there at all the different facilities, fighting in court as well. Is there one animal who you followed and you can say, wow, I'm really happy for this particular animal? I mean, is there one that you've become close to in this whole ordeal?
There are so many. I think one we can talk about is Luna from Dade City's Wild Things, who was purchased from Joe Exotic by Dade City's Wild Things when she was just a few weeks old. And at that age, her eyes may not have even been open. She certainly didn't have a fully functioning immune system yet. She wasn't even old enough to be able to regulate her body temperature on her own. But she was sold and transported from Oklahoma to Florida and immediately put to work in the big cat cub petting industry. And her story was revealed in PETA's eyewitness investigation of Dade City's Wild Things, which everyone can see at PETA.org. She was slapped around when she didn't want to engage in interactions with members of the public. When she didn't want to swim in the pool for those forced swim encounters, she was thrown in anyway. And when she tried to get out, she was pulled back in by her tail. She was subjected to constant harassment and abuse by Dade City's Wild Things. But thanks to PETA's litigation, we were able to rescue her. And she and her friend Remington, who is they're both white tigers, Dade City's Wild Things, fought tooth and nail to keep those two white tigers because they desperately wanted to breed them. But they are now thriving and living their best lives at the Turpentine Creek Wildlife Refuge in Arkansas.
Oh, there. Now that's a happy story. That's a happy ending. Yeah. Now it's going to be happy for everyone if all the things that you talked about earlier happen, and Tim Stark's out of business, and Jeff Lowe's out of business, and the Tiger King stays imprisoned, and Carol Baskin gets her Big Cat Act, passed and signed by Biden. How about you? How about Brittany Peet? What's making you happy about all this? Because I know when we started talking about all this before Tiger King, we were talking about bears, and now this has become, it's faster than you thought that it would happen, and now it looks like almost you've toppled this really heinous industry. How do you feel personally about all that's happened just within the last year?
I'm thrilled about it. 5 or 6 years ago, we put together a plan to eradicate this industry, and it's working. And so that's incredibly gratifying. And this is an industry that creates so much cruelty from the moment that a cub is born and stolen from her mother, put through this horrifying cub encounter process. And then, at that point, they're just a few months old, and these cats can live to be in their 20s. And so, what happens to them for the rest of their lives? A lot of them are simply killed, but the rest are either used as breeding machines themselves, or they just languish in horrifying conditions for more than a decade or 2 decades even. So we're going to be preventing a tremendous amount of suffering through all of this work. And it allows us to move on to the next thing in our quest to eradicate roadside zoos altogether.
Yeah. And any hint on what that next thing might be? Or I know you have a thing for bears. Are bears?
Absolutely. Yeah. We're always working on behalf of bears, and we have a lot of really, really exciting plans to eradicate the cruelty and confinement of bears in the roadside zoo industry. But one of our next major initiatives is going to be focusing on the solitary confinement of social species. That includes lions and elephants and primates. We see so many of these animals confined all alone in roadside zoos across the country. And it is literally torture for these animals. It's the worst thing that you can do to a social animal. And that's one of the things that we're going to be addressing full force next.
Well, if the courts rule that you can't take a baby from a mother, an animal, right? The maternal deprivation is real. They probably would frown upon taking social animals and isolating them, right?
That's what we think. There's a tremendous amount of scientific support for the arguments that we'll be making. And so we're really looking forward to going after this. And again, trying to prevent a tremendous amount of suffering in captivity. And just like the big cat cub petting industry, the solitary confinement of social species creates a tremendous amount of suffering.
All right. Well, Brittany Peet, congratulations on what you've done with the big cat petting industry.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Brittany Peet is PETA Foundation Deputy General Counsel for Captive Animal Law Enforcement, aka CALE, on our Tiger King update. Don't forget, there's still one thing you can do. Contact the Senate to pass that law that shuts down big cat petting zoos. Take action. Go to PETA.org now. And that's our show for today. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to send a link of this show to your friends. Tell them you like the PETA Podcast. Contact us at PETA.org. You can find me on Twitter at Emil Amok. That's EMILAMOK. Or see my vlog at AMOK.com, or see my work at ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. That's at AALDEF.org/blog. Once again, thank you for listening. Check out all our episodes on your favorite podcast app or on Apple Podcasts, where you can rate and review the show. It helps get the word out about the issues you care about. Our music is provided by Carbon Works. Check them out on YouTube. And join us again next time for more insight into animal rights and the fight for a cruelty-free world on the PETA Podcast. I'm Emil Guillermo.